The news that Carlton and United has decided not to renew its Sizey sponsorship was broken at last night's meeting of the NRL. For the past 3 years, Carlton and United has been a major sponsor of the local league competition, with much of the money going directly to local clubs. The league says the loss is disappointing.
We are very disappointed about their decision. It certainly will affect us. For an organisation like ours to lose a sponsorship of $35,000. It is very disappointing.
The move by Carlton and United has been seen in some quarters as the start of a withdrawal by the breweries from sponsoring regional sports and are concentrating on national events. The NRL says Tui's had for a long time been interested in sponsoring the league, but when approached recently, Tui's flatly rejected a request to view a submission from the NRL. Graham Hards is astonished that both these companies are not interested when Newcastle is seemingly on the verge of entering Sydney.
Well, it was totally surprising to me. I'd negotiated the contracts up till this year, and I felt that we had so much to offer a company like that, especially in 1988, where they could be rewarded financially for the support they've given past to the Newcastle Rugby League.
It was decided that even the largest of mobile cranes couldn't support the 53 tonnes of steel sufficiently to be sure of a safe launching. So, for a little commercial consideration, the barge was brought instead to the launching wharf on the Hunter River, owned by the Department of Defence, adjacent to Carrington Slipway's fiberglass division. This is where the first of the new generation of mine hunters, the Rush Cutter, was launched recently. Bayside Engineering shared not only the launching facility with Carrington Slipways, but also, in one way, the construction method. First, the hull of the 18 by 17 metre barge was welded upside down. Then the whole thing was inverted to facilitate hand-down welding all the way. It's a dumb barge, meaning no motor and no steering, and it'll be used as a floating maintenance platform in Newcastle Harbour, allowing work on the many timber piles supporting the wharves. It wasn't a formal launching, no name was bestowed, but no doubt some wag amongst the workforce will soon christen it unofficially with a name that'll stick better than any the MSB could come up with. On board, for comfort, a lunchroom and shower facilities, almost all the comforts of home. Construction time, 5 months, and the cost, $200,000.
Barrington Tops National Park, one of 36 areas in New South Wales identified as having wilderness value. In 1985, the Minister for Planning and Environment, Bob Carr, appointed a working group. Its job was to assess potential areas and recommend action, including legislation for wilderness protection and management. The committee's findings were contained in a report which was released for public comment earlier this year. The group defines wilderness as a large tract of land with native plants and animal communities, not substantially modified by humans and their works, of sufficient area to make practicable its preservation and appropriate use in an unimpaired condition, and giving opportunities for solitude and recreation. The argument over the proposed wilderness legislation has involved a wide cross-section of the community, including farmers, the timber industry, local governments and people who use national parks for recreation. And the one thing to emerge so far in the debate is that the issue of wilderness areas in New South Wales remains as complex and as delicate as this unique environment. So why protect wilderness areas?
You've got to bear in mind that only 4% of New South Wales, and as the years go by, that's being gnawed at bit by bit. We're losing it. And I think it makes good sense on conservation grounds to save what we can of that part of the country that's still as it was in 1788. And that's the case for wilderness protection.
The report by the Wilderness Working Group has been welcomed by most conservationists, but not all are pleased with the findings. The proposed area in the Barrington Tops, for instance, enclosed by the white boundary, not only includes the existing national park, shown here in light green, but also takes in portions of the state forest, shown in dark green. That effectively locks up forest reserves to the timber industry and limits access by four-wheel drivers. In other parts of the state, the proposed wilderness areas include mining leases and grazing land. The Four-Wheel Drive Association was one of the first to make a submission on the report. The council's Hunter Chairman, Alan Whitten, says in principle his members are in favour of the concept, but he says they don't want to see existing trails closed, and discounts the claim that four-wheel drive vehicles harm the environment.
The Four-Wheel Drive Association of New South Wales and the ACT, we have a definite management plan, and it's structured in that management plan is that we believe in conservation. In fact, we believe in wilderness. We are not opposed to wilderness, but what we are opposed to is the closing of these areas so that we cannot drive our vehicles in here to experience wilderness. What the four-wheel drives are hoping most of all, Mark, where we're standing now is right in the heart, if I can use that term, of the proposed wilderness area. The thing that the four-wheel drives hope that comes out of it is, one, we don't see barriers like this on these trails blocking our access, and two, that these tracks remain in the condition that they are now for use by us and anybody else who wants to drive or ride a horse or ride a motorbike or even a push bike here, or walk through. But we hope that the public get access.
And these owners have also found support from some bushwalkers, who claim trails should be left open and maintained in the event of an emergency.
Well, it's always there in emergencies if there's reasonable access in and out in a sort of an arterial sense. And that no doubt allows people to get in and go into the gullies and go do what they want to do with some degree of safety.
You look at, if you make this whole wilderness and you get a fire through here and you've got no tracks to come in by, a whole lot will go. You get bushwalkers or whatever in here and someone hurts himself, there's no way in down, you get a chopper or anything in down the bottom.
Limiting access to these proposed areas is also seen by local councils as a threat to tourist potential and a loss in revenue.
We have a natural potential here for tourism because of the forest areas that we have and also the national park, and we would like to see the national park remain open and be accessible to all people, and that is an important part of our economy.
Despite that, the government remains convinced tourism will be generated, not diminished, by the proposed wilderness areas.
It's a big win. It's a big win for tourism. This is the way tourism must go. People are looking more and more for holidays where they experience something different, where they experience a taste of the great natural areas, where they can get into areas that are a little bit difficult to explore. And by creating new parks, by protecting our wilderness, we're giving ourselves an edge into the future in tourism. People will choose this country rather than countries that destroyed their great natural areas.
Hello everyone, I'm Mark Warren. Join me tonight on NBN's Hour of News as we take a close look at the state government's proposed wilderness legislation. Controversial legislation which could drastically affect our region.
Join Ray Deneen and John Church for all the news tonight at 6.
many years, timber production has been the major industry in towns like Gloucester and Dundalk. Local councils see the possible loss of forest reserves as threatening the future growth of their communities.
Well, there's no doubt that the working party, as far as we're concerned, has looked at the flora and fauna only and not the human aspect, and that's the most important part. And it's certainly going to have effects on our two towns economically, because both of our towns rely heavily upon the timber industry as one of our main industries. And so we see that with the transfer of land from the Forestry Commission to the National Park is going to cut down on the availability of timber from those areas, which in turn has an effect on the working life of our mills. And so if the working life of our mills is shortened, then we have people who are going to be put out of work when the mills close down.
The Forest Products Association too has reacted strongly to the wilderness proposals. In an aggressive media campaign, the FPA has highlighted its opposition to the possible loss of productive forests.
So you're a conservationist?
I want all logging to stop.
But the forest industry replace every tree they take.
I don't care.
And if all logging stopped, prices would rise dramatically.
I don't care.
Imagine what that would do to the cost of housing.
I don't care.
If we can convince the public and public opinion that the industry is important, then we can convince politicians at the same time they need to make decisions for the industry that are positive.
But both the Minister for Forests, Jack Hallam, and Planning and Environment Minister Bob Carr maintain any form of wilderness legislation adopted by the government would not affect land already allocated to the timber industry following the 1982 rainforest decision.
Mr. Hallam and I have said, and we've made it very clear, there'd be no